welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm your host, Melissa Whitty, and this is my co-host, Jenin Nunez. We're here to talk to you today about the Trump's first 48 hours. But before we get into that, if you could, go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, wherever you're watching us, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, X. We really appreciate it. It helps us in the algorithm. You can leave us a review. That's awesome too. But yeah, let's get into it on these executive orders that Trump has issued. All, what is it, 200 of them. They were definitely very busy bees prior to Inauguration Day.
Definitely. So yeah, I took a quick look at all of them and a longer look at some of them that struck me as slightly more troublesome. I do have to say, my favorite one was entitled "Putting People Over Fish." It was actually a serious act, but I thought the title was funny. But I think one of the ones I think is worth discussing and somewhat troublesome is more generically named "Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and Other National Security and Public Safety Threats." And as always, these things sound good. None of us like terrorists. None of us like national security and public safety threats. But of course, the question of what constitutes a terrorist and a national security threat, one man's national security threat might be another man's criticism of a foreign state's genocide. So, that's why we have to be a bit careful with these things. And what this effectively does, sort of in sum and substance, is it provides for the deportation or expulsion from the country of non-citizens who, the language of the executive order is that bear hostile attitudes towards United States citizens, culture, government institutions, or founding principles, and advocate for, aid, or support designated foreign terrorists and other threats to our national security. I think we'd all agree that's pretty vaguely worded, and probably intentionally. So a lot of times the point of these laws or these executive orders is to kind of chill speech. So I think a lot of people are aware that it's very likely one of the motivations is to quell pro-Palestine speech, especially on college campuses. There's this claim that there are all these Hamas supporters who are from other countries on college campuses. I think this is kind of a made-up hysteria.
Right. Well, it's definitely being sold as the anti Hamas supporters. Yeah. This is, in Israeli media, it was sold as that, as Trump passes the executive order to deport Hamas supporters in the U.S. on student visa. That was in Israel Times. That was in the Israeli Times, Jerusalem Post. All of the big Zionist Twitter accounts were pushing that, except, I pointed out yesterday that the executive order doesn't include the words colleges, universities, students, deport. It does say remove. It doesn't say anything about Hamas. And for me, when I read it, it felt almost entirely symbolic. There was a little bit really defining exactly what would qualify for quote unquote removal or denial of your visa. And part of it, I'll let you read it here in just a second, about specifically about support of American culture. Could definitely be up for challenge, and American culture and America's founding principles. But to me, most of it was, it's meant to chill speech. And of course, when you've got people pushing it, saying that you could get deported if you quote unquote support Hamas, people aren't going to go read it. They're not going to understand it. And they're going to choose not to speak out, not to criticize. Right.
Right. Especially because support for Hamas has been conflated with criticism of Israel or advocacy for Palestinian human rights. So, I think the chilling effect is exactly what it's intended to do. I doubt it will be used for a student, a student who just, advocates for Palestinian human rights, or even says, I don't like American food. I guess technically that would fall in the American culture. But I think, one of the concerns we have with a law like this, or an executive order, it's technically not a law, is, the chilling effect that it will have. And if I were a foreign student, I think I would be very reluctant to be critical vocally in the classroom or online of, for instance, actions of the U.S. government, maybe our aid. Technically, United States government aid in support of Israel is like our government. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was used by some of the crazy pro-Israel zealots that we know online, at least to intimidate. I'm sure they'll report some of the students using this
Mhm.
and at least put them through hell. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Number one, I went and looked at the countries last night. I was curious, because there's a part in the EO talking about identifying countries where basically people, it might be a problem, as if these countries aren't already well identified, as if
yeah,
we don't have enough laws against terrorism.
yeah,
You read the EO, you would think that we didn't even have a single law prohibiting their support,
yeah,
financial or, advocating for designated terrorist groups. We, of course, have literal books full of laws
yeah,
prohibiting that. It's all over the visa applications. They specifically ask you if you support or if you sympathize with any designated terrorist. It's patently absurd, right? That this idea that we've just got terrorist supporters streaming through on
yeah,
the student visa program. But specifically, I was curious about by country, and of course, most of the student visas go to China and India. And then there's just a really small amount that go. I think Saudi Arabia was like number 8 or 9, and they had like 15,000 students, which might sound like a lot, but when you're talking about across the
yeah,
entire country and in multiple, you got medical school, law school, undergrad, that's
yeah,
very few students per university or college in the
yeah,
US. And then the next was like, I think, Bahrain, Qatar, probably total there was less than 30,000. And I don't know how many universities are in this country, but that is a very small number.
yeah.
These protests are American kids who are
Oh,
disturbed
for sure.
by
Yeah,
their government, the actions of their government, which they vehemently oppose. Why? Because they were raised to believe American values and principles, and that is that all men are created equal, and that we have certain God-given rights, and those rights are not respected by the state of Israel, and Palestinians do not have them, even though we as Americans have been taught that our entire lives, that all life is precious and that we all deserve equal rights. So it should really be not a shocker at all to anyone that American kids would vehemently oppose the tyrannical actions of the Israeli government.
yeah, yeah. But of course, it's been a very successful propaganda tool to paint the supporters as anti-Semitic, or the protesters as anti-Semitic Hamas supporters. That's just worked very well, and it appeals to the anti-woke contingent, who's like, oh, this is more proof that our universities are going to hell. The students are supporting Hamas, which is total bullshit. I mean, anyone who's you go to these universities, it's all American kids. A lot of them are Jewish, is always the case in the pro-Palestine movement. Always like tons
Mm-hmm.
of Jewish. That was my experience as part of Students for Justice in Palestine. So yeah, it's totally
Oh yeah,
bullshit.
definitely, because of course the actions of the state of Israel reflect very poorly on
yeah,
Jews, right? And of course they try
yeah,
to conflate the actions of the government of Israel as supported by all Jews. So I certainly know if I were Jewish, I would be just up in arms all the time at the
yeah,
idea. I've got a handful of followers that are Jewish that, God bless them. Every time I've got one guy, he is, I really, I can't tell you how much I appreciate him. Anytime I post something, immediately he goes and he tells the person off,
yeah,
he says, hey,
yeah,
I'm Jewish. You don't speak for me. Yada, yada. He never lectures me about like
yeah.
watch your tone or anything. Every time, I'm telling you, this has been going on for a full year. I mean, God bless him. He's anonymous. I don't know his name, but if he watches this, he knows who he is, and I certainly I see him and I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and on that note, actually, it's a bit of a deviation from the executive order theme, but I think it's also important to talk about. Harvard just basically ended free speech on its campus by adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism. So it makes it punishable as like a civil rights violation, basically, sort of as it's considered anti-Semitism. And the list goes on very long, but it includes things like not criticizing Israel when you're not criticizing other governments, uh,
Hold that. Yeah, I think
comparing. comparing
Holding them to a
Israel to
standard.
Nazi Germany, yeah, holding them to an unfair standard. I mean, really like crazy, you know. So technically, if you say Israel is an apartheid state, but you don't also say, oh, also South Africa was an apartheid state too at some time, I guess that could be anti-Semitic or something. I
Right.
mean, just nutty. And you know, even the guy who wrote this said that this was not intended to be like enforceable. This was sort of how you can look for indicia of anti-Semitism, right? Sometimes these are some of the signs.
Right.
Criticizing Israel excessively, but that doesn't mean like that's how you uh,
Right. How you should
punish.
apply. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, this will have a severe chilling effect on students on discussion of
Hmm.
Palestine and Israel. You know, if I were part way through a 4-year degree, I would be pretty pissed because Harvard purports to protect free speech. I would be like, I signed up to go to a university that protects my first or free speech rights and those of my fellow students, so we can have like important and honest discussions. And now they just changed things and pulled the wrong
Right.
rug out
Yeah.
from under me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely, what the message they're sending is that we care more about our funding than we do about respecting your God given right to free
Yeah.
speech. All right. We already have speech laws in this country specifically about threats of violence. You
Mhm.
are not allowed to threaten people with violence. And, and of course, because we don't have any cases in which people were filing actual criminal suits against the school. These people are not getting threatened with physical violence. They aren't being held against their will. There are already laws to protect that. This is quite literally rules passed by the school to protect the feelings of certain students, which
Right.
used to be something that the right railed against constantly because it's
Yeah.
so ludicrous. And now, because of this one particular niche issue, the right all of a sudden loves safe spaces, loves
Yeah.
anti-speech rules, and it's really just gross if you think about it, especially
Yeah.
because you can criticize America all day
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the logic is so ridiculous that basically that anti-Zionism is a form of anti-Semitism. That's the other argument, because Zionism is so integral to the Jewish identity, which is completely ridiculous. First of all, when at the beginning of the Zionist movement in the late 1800s, there were tons of Jews who were against it,
Mhm.
and there still are a lot of anti-Zionist Jews, both like lots of left-leaning people who've departed from their families. There's also like some of the very, very ultra orthodox, or there's a sect, I forgot what they're called, but they're anti-Zionist. They think that you know, God would make it clear when he wanted the Jews to return to Israel, and they're basically forcing this. And it has
Okay.
nothing to do with religion or God. It's a secular state, and it's blasphemous. And they advocate on behalf of the Palestinians all the time. So this conflation is absurd. And saying that students advocating for Palestinian rights or for a one-state solution are effectively depriving Jews of their right to self-determination. That's absurd. And also, Palestinians are deprived of our right to advocate for our own self-determination
Right.
all the time. Like,
Right.
if you
Right.
say we should get to live in Palestine, that's considered anti-Semitic. So,
Correct. Yeah. It's funny because I'm kind of a Pat Buchanan, paleo conservative. I wouldn't like maybe necessarily call myself that, but I certainly subscribe to a lot of their ideas and whatnot. Pat Buchanan is vehemently against the idea of self determination, and he's got
yeah,
some good. I do think, as far as America is concerned, that kind of is because we are multicultural, right?
yeah,
And so this idea that giving all this extra or specific rights to each and every single, we have to blend together, right?
yeah,
Americans have a right, I guess, as a country itself, but the idea of self-determination, especially when comes to just certain sects of people, certain races or religions or whatnot, it can become very dangerous in a multicultural country like the US, right?
yeah.
Because you end up prioritizing some over others because
Or
there's
like Israel.
right. And so, in the case of the US, where we give an immense amount of, political and financial support, aid, whatever, we give it away in preference of this one group of people, right? And so yesterday during her confirmation hearing, Elise Stefanik, who is Trump's nominee to the UN, to be the U.S. ambassador to the UN. She was specifically asked, do Palestinians have the right to self-determination? And she refused to answer the question. Which was, to me, pretty telling, right?
Yeah.
Because of course, if you asked her if Jews had the right to self-determination, that would be a
Yeah,
no-brainer.
of course, yeah.
She was then asked, but this is by Chris Van Hollen. I think he's Connecticut's senator. Don't quote me on that. She was then asked by him if she believed that Jews had a biblical right to the Holy Land of Israel.
Yeah.
Well, no, excuse me, I take that back. To the land of the West Bank, aka Judea and Samaria, which she said, yes, I believe that the Jewish people have a biblical right to the land, which of course I nearly hit the roof on that because it's pretty, as far as I'm concerned, it's disqualifying, right?
Well, and you've made this really good point to me before. Someone should ask these people, because she's not the first one. I think Huckabee thinks the same thing. She's not the only one who believes this. Well, what do you want to do with the Palestinians then who live there? Are you all the millions of people just supposed to go move somewhere else? Or should Israel just kill them? Should they just live indefinitely with no rights? Is that what's expected of them? Steal? Because I don't think there's an answer to that question. Not a good one.
Well, they'll, sheepishly say they should go to other Arab countries. And of course, the answer is, okay, but these other Arab countries have said, no, we will not help you with the ethnic cleansing of the state of Palestine. We will not be your partner in this. Yeah. So when they say no, what is your plan B? Yeah. Okay. And I think that anyone who says this should be forced. They should not be allowed to skirt out of that. Yeah. They should, if you have an idea, if you have thought about it enough that you believe they have a biblical right to the land, then you should be forced, all right, upon, penalty of perjury to answer what are you going to do with the people who already live there?
That's right. That's right. You're absolutely right about that. So hopefully there'll be some Congress members listening.
Yes.
One of the next hearings, can you do this?
Please.
Thomas Massey. No, wait, he's not in the Senate. Okay.
I know. Yeah. I know. Rand Paul, I don't know if you're sitting on but he's like, Rand's like, oh no. Yeah. He's like, I'm already in enough trouble. Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean there's a handful of Democrat senators now who, of course, now that it's Republicans in charge, they're ready and comfortable. Which, whatever, I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. There was some good news on the foreign policy front. I've been I was like elated about the ceasefire, and then when Witkoff said he wanted to go to Gaza, I was like, okay, great. I was just very, very happy. Then it looked like the West Bank was in flames, and the IDF is just shooting people. Settlers are burning people's houses with them inside. So just awful. And then it started to dawn on me that it was likely that one of the concessions Trump had gotten was that Netanyahu could just let the settlers do whatever they wanted in the West Bank, which is troubling. But today there was some better news, which was a guy named Mike Dominio has been... was he appointed, or I don't know what the
so he was appointed, and thankfully it's not a Senate appointment.
Right, so no confirmation process necessary. Right. And it's assistant to the Secretary of National Defense, Secretary of Defense.
Right, yes, so he's the Undersecretary of Defense.
And he's very, very good. His main I would say the thrust of his belief system is that the U.S. should not be in the Middle East. We should just get
I love it.
He was actually on Glenn Greenwald's system update right before me once, and he listened to me. I caught the end of his, and I was like, and he definitely is with us on all of this. So that was good news to me. This will be a powerful position. Maybe he can make Hegseth like a little bit sane.
I know. Let me read this for the people who don't follow us on X. Because this was just so, I'm telling you, I posted this earlier. I was like, this man is after my heart. He said this was in February 2024. Domino declared that the Middle East does not really matter for the U.S. interests, arguing that vital and existential threats in the Middle East are best characterized as minimal to non-existent, and that the U.S. role in the region has not provided any benefits. He said the U.S. can prevent terrorist threats emanating from the region without major military presence, instead using diplomacy, leaning on local actors, intelligence monitoring, and long-range strikes. He said U.S. should significantly reduce its troop presence in the region, remove military outposts in Iraq, Syria, and the Levant, and ultimately reassess its presence in the Gulf. Amen,
Incredible.
brother.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We love you. We are, we're gonna be fangirls. I'm not gonna lie. I will
Yes. We
fangirl
gotta
all day
tag him.
long.
We gotta tag him in this episode. He follows me, so maybe he'll see
Oh,
it.
does he? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. If you ever want to
And
come on, and we would love it.
oh yeah, he probably can't now, but normally once you get a job in government, they don't want you doing these kinds of things. Certainly not with two lunatics like us, but
True.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I need approval to sign on with the village crazy lady.
So what kind of influence do you think he'll be able to have?
So I love these kind of guys right here, right? I love the ones that are like behind the scenes, because I genuinely feel like they're the ones that pull the
I
strings.
think so.
And we saw the Israeli lobby freaking out earlier, which is interesting because right before Trump announced this, I feel like he didn't. I think this was kind of sprung, right?
Yeah.
There was another guy, can't remember his name, but he was like a super, like an Iran hawk, right? He was one of the guys who convinced Trump to get out of the Iran deal. I can't remember his name. He was a real kind of nerdy guy.
Are you talking about Mark Levine?
No. It was it was another bureaucrat. I reposted about it, but I can't think of the guy's name right now. But he was replaced. He was just kind of thrown out, like, unceremoniously, and then yesterday they announced, or I guess Monday they announced this guy, the Domino, and he was sworn in yesterday. It was sprung on, and so you saw people like Mark Levin, freaking out, right? Yeah. Ben Shapiro freaking out.
Yeah.
Apparently, the knives are just out, which is fascinating because what it actually tells me. So Trump, like, withholding this, right, and not telling anyone, and then just doing it. He knows. He knows. He knows the kind of opposition he's going to be up against.
Yeah.
He knows what he's going to have to deal with, and I think in a lot of ways he and I know people are going to be like, oh, you're just you're trying to, you're bootlicking for Trump, and I'm like, no, and I try not to be like all Q and all he's playing 4D chess and whatnot, but I mean, Trump isn't stupid. He understands the kind of resistance he would be up against if he announced this stuff, but clearly he had it planned, right?
Of course. Yep.
And
absolutely.
so
I don't think there's any other way to read this situation. And like, I mean, I had never heard of Witkoff till last weekend when he went to and like put the boot on Netanyahu's neck.
And everybody is like loves Witkoff right now, right?
I know.
I mean, he is like,
not the Hawks. The Hawks hate him.
Yeah. They hate. I mean, Mark Levin had a conniption all afternoon over Steve Witkoff because Witkoff said that he would talk to Hamas directly, right?
Right.
And when it comes to Hamas, I see them mostly as resistance. I'm actually not a fan of a lot of the things that I've seen of them, to be quite honest with you, as far as like the way that they governed prior to October 7th. But for the most part, I try to just keep my mouth shut on foreign governments that I don't have any influence or control over, like that aren't dependent on me. There's a lot of foreign governments that I think are kind of shitty. Whatever, that's their people's problem and whatnot. But I do see them now, a year later, as this, they clearly are symbolic as of resistance. So, these people saying like, oh, we won't deal with Hamas. I just think, well, if they just regroup and rename, a rose by any other name is still a rose.
I mean, you have to talk to them. Like, I'm not a fan of Hamas, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination. And, there are components of Hamas that are really governmental in nature, and those people are not combatants and they're not terrorists, but there's clearly a militant wing that engages in terroristic acts that I disapprove of and I do not support in any way.
And they don't allow dissent by their own people. Like, that's the big thing to me, right? It's not even that you're hostile to other countries. It's that, do you respect the dissent of your own people? And if your people aren't able to or comfortable with dissenting and calling you out and not agreeing with your government, then to me, that's not something that I support. It's not something that I want. And it's, not something that I would
Well,
ever want to be
and
partners
it's
with.
not, I don't understand how you can conduct, I mean, we live in an international community and like we have to
Right.
talk to each other. I think the IDF engages in acts of terrorism by any
Right.
definition. They shoot kids in the head. So, which actually,
Right.
I'm going to get myself in trouble. So I'm going to shut up. But, uh, but I also think that we should talk to the IDF. I don't think we should be one with the IDF.
Right.
But if we actually separated ourselves, I think it would be important to conduct diplomacy with both Hamas and the IDF. And I think they also have to conduct, they have to talk to each other.
Right. Yeah. But
I don't see what we get by being like children, being like, they're terrorists, I'm not going to talk to them. That's not how
right.
the world works. So.
And if a new government, quote unquote, formed in Gaza, it's not like it would be necessarily any different. Like you could take the same guys, stop calling them Hamas, start calling them something else. Does it change anything? Really?
Right.
Right? You have a resistance group that has formed and hardened because of the oppression that they have been under for 80 years. Okay. And the fact that you're just not willing to be honest about this, right?
Yeah.
It's just infuriating.
It is. And speaking also of not allowing dissent by our own people, Israel just made a law that if you deny the government's version of October 7th, which includes like specific things that have been disproven, like the 40 beheaded babies, I think, then you can be subject to criminal prosecution and up to 5 years imprisonment.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of left-wing journalists in Israel.
Well, we all know. We all know that when they start passing laws about whether or not you can question it, that means that they've found the truth. All right. Definitely. It's so bizarre because I think, like in the US, we are so spoiled.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that because I don't think that we're spoiled. I do believe that these are rights given by God. And so, no, the government simply respecting that shouldn't really necessarily qualify me as spoiled.
Yeah.
But just think about the number of conspiracy theories, of dissent, of questioning that has gone on after 9/11, right? We have entire movies. We have entire groups put together questioning the official narrative of 9/11. Whether or not you agree with that is irrelevant. I can't imagine. I actually don't know of an American, even your most patriotic, government-loving American, that would say that people who question the official story about 9/11 should be thrown in prison for 5 years.
Yeah.
If our government tried to, I genuinely believe even the most patriotic people who definitely believe the official story, no matter how ridiculous it is, they would never support something like that. So the fact that this passed the Knesset with, from what I understand, pretty overwhelming, I think it was just a very small, like 20% that dissented on that, is concerning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, any other executive orders since we?
Oh yeah, we did. Actually,
so,
There was another good one that I loved. There's a lot of America first in this policy. Definitely.
Oh, let me quickly say there that because I don't think I've mentioned it, there were a couple that had to do with the lawsuits I've had. I mean, they don't directly address them, but challenging the government involvement in social media censorship or internet censorship, and basically saying we're not doing this anymore. We're going to find strategies to make sure it doesn't happen. So that's great. Great for me. I need new work, new cases, because those will be probably disappearing.
Good.
So what else did you like?
Trump issued a one flag policy banning pride flags and foreign flags from flying at U.S. government buildings here and abroad. And here's the wording. Starting immediately, only the United States of America flag is authorized to be flown or displayed at U.S. facilities, both domestic and abroad, and featured in U.S. government content. No more Ukraine flags. No more Israel flags.
Do you think they're really going to apply it to Israel flags?
Yes, yeah. I mean, no foreign flags.
I walked the halls of Congress.
So now I don't know if this. I don't know if this applies to Congress because that would be a separate branch. But it will apply to anybody trying to fly that flag in the DoD, the
Mhm.
DOJ, you
Any of
know,
the executive branches.
any of the executive branches, any government facility whatsoever,
Is
other
Yeah.
than probably Congress, to be quite honest with
Yeah,
you.
well, yeah, last time I walked the halls of Congress, I think this was December 2023, the entire thing was just Israel flags. I was like I was really like, do I live in Israel? Like why are
It's
all my
bizarre.
Congress members flying Israel flags? Like this is so fucking weird.
Yeah, it's creepy, right?
Yes, it's
Because these
creepy.
are the same people that like don't fly American flags, which is again like weird, you
There
know.
were some that had America and Israel, but like
Yeah.
just as a little reminder, those are not the same countries. We are a different country. We are a
Yeah.
sovereign country. We're not part of Israel.
Well,
Our Congress members don't know that, but
it was bizarre listening to Elise Stefanik's testimony yesterday. You know, she quite literally said that she was going to the UN to combat the anti Semitism and anti Israel uh, uh, temperature, or what it was, sentiment that abound there. That she just went on and on about how Israel is so targeted. I'm like, it was, if you had listened to her, you would genuinely think that she had been nominated to go represent the
I,
country of Israel in the UN. Which again, I'm like, if you want to, girl, just go over there and apply for citizenship. I
well,
mean,
she's not. She's Catholic, oddly, but I mean,
right.
she's also clearly. I think it was Glenn Greenwald or Michael Tracy was talking about her on a podcast. She was apparently fairly moderate for some time, but
Mhm.
then seems to have seen an opportunity to make a big name for herself.
Oh,
And she
girl.
certainly seems to have caught Miriam Adelson's attention.
all
That's
you
my
got to
guess.
do all you got to do is go through her campaign finances, which I have done, and you see real quick I mean, she just sold out. She did. You go through her leadership packs. She's got two. Oh no, she's got two joint fundraising packs. She's got one leadership pack, and then she's got her principal campaign. Something like, the last time I checked, it was like $13 million was what she raised in 2022, and she didn't have a primary, and her opponent, I think, spent like $300,000. So she's just blowing it. She just got bought out. It is
Yeah.
what it is. I mean,
Well,
it's
man,
pretty
yeah,
pathetic, that you would
yeah,
sell your integrity
yeah. In
for
your
that
country,
in your country,
you're
not just,
selling
yeah,
your country
yeah,
out, and the
yeah.
people who voted for you to represent them, not to represent a foreign government. But
Yeah, but she is. I made a comment about her yesterday, and of course I had a little group of her fanboys come in. Had to tell a couple people off, like, until you go through her finances, don't you ever talk to me, because this woman is a crook. Okay,
oh
she is a
yeah,
crook.
yeah,
Even if she wasn't a traitor, she's an absolute crook,
yep,
and I can prove it. So you don't go there with me. But
yeah. I mean, the number of them who are just in the same situation is
mhm.
just stunning. So,
So we saw
I
that, and I was really happy about that one.
yeah,
Birthright citizenship.
yeah,
That's the one, right? That is the one that everyone is going to.
to challenge. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, well, it goes against clearly established Supreme Court precedent, so that'll obviously go to the Supreme Court pretty fast, I think, and they'll
right.
decide if they want to revisit it. I don't.
What do
I
you?
mean,
What are your thoughts on it?
philosophically, I'm not like a birthright citizenship person. I don't get it. Like I think it's kind of weird that we have it. I guess it maybe made
No.
sense when there weren't that many people here,
Oh,
and we're
it
just like we
definitely.
need whoever we can. But it's
It.
not. It's like a lot of European countries, for instance, and other they don't give birthright citizenship because
Right.
like the people might not share your values. They don't necessarily have
Mhm.
loyalty to the country. And I mean, I use it as an example. I was actually born in Saudi Arabia because my dad was working there. Neither of my parents are Saudi. I haven't been there since I was 2. I have
Mhm.
nothing like in common with Saudi culture. I don't speak
Right.
Arabic. I
Mhm.
like don't particularly care for Saudi Arabia. I've never been back since I was 2 years old. But like if the situation was reversed and it was the US, I would have citizenship. Why should I get to be a citizen? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. It definitely made sense, obviously, at the time that it was passed, at the end of slavery, because you had
Yeah.
southern states, they were going
Right.
to
That's
deny citizenship. Of course, we all understand that. Like,
yeah.
but the times have changed,
Yes,
okay? It
things have
just,
changed.
and now, just the simple fact that we have birthright, we have birth tourism, uh
Yeah.
people coming here paying thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Somebody
Yeah.
posted about it earlier. 40,000 births a year are the
Yeah.
result of citizenship tourism, and they're coming here, they're paying outrageous
That's
amounts of money
weird.
to
Yeah.
come here, give birth. I was telling about, I live in a military town. I've known two different families where the soldier had married. These were
Mm,
actually Europeans, women. They come back, the sisters come, the sisters get
mm,
pregnant, the sisters come,
mm,
they stay with the with
yeah.
their sisters, give birth here so that their
Mm,
kid can
mm,
have
yeah.
US citizenship, right?
Yeah.
So again, that's ridiculous. For me, it needs to end. Somebody was like, "We shouldn't be punishing children." I'm like, I don't feel like it's punishing children to not give them automatic citizenship
No.
when their parents don't have
I
citizenship.
mean, I will say I don't think it should be retroactive. I think anybody who's
Of
going to get
course, no, and
citizenship
I
should be.
don't think
But
anybody has suggested that it would be
no, I don't.
retroactive.
I
Yeah,
I mean, there are crazy people on Twitter
well,
saying like
yeah,
so and so's citizenship is under threat. I'm like, they're not. I don't think they're going to apply it to people who like got citizenship already.
right,
But there's always someone trying to whip up hysteria on Twitter, and
right, yeah,
I
and then a new one that just passed. Apparently, Tom Homan, I don't know his name, ICE director, he just basically issued an order saying that we're not going to allow you to apply for asylum. I don't actually know. Apparently, there's some kind of obscure rule, which apparently even Biden was using. It's 212F in the and I guess it's kind of like a loophole. And then Biden was using it a little bit, and he had used it to curtail the number of people who could come in down to 1,500 a month. And now Trump has like blown a giant hole in it and said, no, nobody.
Hmm.
And I know that that's really controversial, but I support that as well, because if you start to look at the numbers right now, the asylum courts are backed up like 6 years, and overall immigration courts are backed up 8 years. It's an 8 year backlog.
Yeah,
We
I have
we
a
have
harder. Yeah, I have a harder time with it, and like I struggle with the issue because I'm not someone who wants open borders and endless immigration. On the other hand, a lot of the reason people are fleeing these countries is because of our military action or our support for
mhm.
a certain foreign country's military action, and some other, in South
Venezuela
America,
is another
we have
great one. Yep.
Venezuela. So it's like seems to me kind of like, well, we created the situation there.
Hmm.
I think we should just not create the situation in the first place
Right.
by staying the fuck out of foreign issues,
Right.
unless there's a direct threat to U.S. national security.
Absolutely.
We should always be trying diplomacy, peace, and
Yep.
getting along with everybody else. And the war should be an
Yep.
absolute last resort. Unfortunately, the
Yep.
neocons who run Washington think war is a first resort and peace is the last one.
Right, right. Yeah, our government has been overtaken by psychopaths for the
Yes,
last
it
50
has.
years essentially. But yeah, so hopefully we're going to have cuz I want to talk to Anya Parmpill
Yes.
about this,
Yes.
because Trump, cautiously, fingers crossed, seems to be wanting to take a different approach to Venezuela, right? He, I guess, appointed a new, of course, everybody was like, he put Marco Rubio, who's like a lunatic when it comes to Venezuela, in as Secretary of State. But again, these are kind of like the figureheads, but the people who actually pull the strings, the policy masters behind the scenes, Trump is playing a very different game. And we talked about this. Anya tweeted about it earlier. She actually wrote an entire book on Venezuela and the way in which the U.S. policy has negatively impacted Venezuela.
I have it right here, so I'll hold it up as a teaser. I was like looking through it the other day. This is the.
I know. I only listen to books, so I'm like, I check all the time to see when it's out. I've listened to all of Max's books, and so.
Oh wow. Yeah, we'll get her on here at next episode, most likely. So.
Yeah. So because I really want to hear her take on this, and we also want to hear about Panama, because that's going to be the one,
definitely,
right?
Definitely.
That's the one that Trump really he's got an itch for that, and we've talked about it before. We've explained some of it before, so hopefully we'll get her take on it, because she definitely is well versed in all things Central and South America. So Yep.
Absolutely. So I can hear that my baby is driving my husband nuts upstairs. So I should probably go help.
Yes, yes,
He
yes.
tries to keep him quiet in the bedroom while we do this.
I know. He's so sweet. He is such a sweet baby. But
But
okay.
thank you
Well,
all for
Emma's good.
listening.
Yes,
And
thank
yeah,
you.
we'll be back soon with
Okay.
Tanya,
Yep.
hopefully.
Yes, I know. I'm so excited. Yeah.